A routine evening takes a shocking turn when a white man calls the police on a black teenager outside a grocery store, convinced she doesn't belong there. But what happens when her mother arrives and she's someone he never expected? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Jasmine Carter knew the look, the shift in body language, the quick glances followed by narrowed eyes. She could feel it before she even saw him. She was just standing outside the grocery store, scrolling through her phone while waiting for her mom to pick her up. A simple, everyday moment. But in a world like this, in a neighborhood like this, even existing while black could feel like a crime. Across the parking lot, Ryan Calloway gripped his shopping cart, his knuckles turning white. He wasn't the type to let things slide, not when something seemed off. And to him, this girl standing outside the store, hood up, tapping on her phone, looked off. Ryan was a man of instincts, and his instincts told him that this teenager didn't belong here. He adjusted the sleeve of his jacket and pulled out his phone, his lips pressed into a thin line. Yeah, there's someone acting real suspicious outside Barnett's grocery. A black girl, hoodie on, just standing there, looking around. Might be casing the place. You might want to send someone over before something happens. As soon as he hung up, he folded his arms and stood by his car, watching, waiting. Jasmine had been through this before. Maybe not this exact situation, but something close. Being followed in a store. Being watched too closely at school. The awkward questions when she visited friends in neighborhoods like this. It was all part of the same cycle. Suspicion, accusation, justification. She sighed and glanced at the time. Her mom should be here soon. Hey, the voice was sharp, clipped. She looked up and found herself staring at a white man in his 50s, dressed in khaki slacks and a crisp polo, his gray streaked hair combed perfectly to the side. She didn't respond right away. She had learned that silence was sometimes safer than words. "You waiting for someone?" he asked, his tone carrying the weight of someone who had already made up his mind about her. Jasmine blinked. "Yeah, my mom's picking me up." Ryan scoffed. "Really? Seemed kinda out of place here." She exhaled sharply through her nose. There it was. "I live 10 minutes from here," she said, her voice steady. Ryan studied her for a second, his jaw tightening. He didn't believe her. Didn't want to. "Well, we'll see about that," he muttered. And just like that, red and blue lights cut through the dim evening sky. The two officers stepped out of their patrol car, moving with the slow, deliberate confidence of men who knew their presence alone was enough to shift the energy of a space. Jasmine kept her breath even, her heartbeat steady, but she could already feel the weight of what was about to happen pressing against her chest. The lead officer, a man with a graying mustache and a hard-set expression, looked her over before glancing at Ryan. "You the caller?" Ryan nodded. "Yeah. Saw her standing here for a while. Didn't look right. Thought she might be up to something." Jasmine clenched her jaw. Didn't look right. What did that even mean? The officer turned to her. "Miss, what are you doing here?" "I'm waiting for my mom." The second officer, a younger man with a buzz cut, let out a short breath, as if he had heard this excuse 100 times before. "You got ID on you?" Jasmine blinked. "ID? What for?" The older officer's expression hardened. "Just show us your ID, miss." She felt her fingers tighten around her phone. She knew she had options here: comply, argue, ask if she was being detained, but she also knew how quickly things could escalate. She swallowed her pride and reached into her backpack, pulling out her school ID. "Here." The officer glanced at it but didn't hand it back right away. Instead, he looked at Ryan. "You sure you don't recognize her from around here?" Ryan shook his head. "Nope, never seen her before in my life." "That's funny," Jasmine muttered, unable to help herself. "I've been coming to the store since I was a kid." The second officer took a small step forward. "Is that so?" Jasmine met his gaze. "Yeah, that's so." A tense silence stretched between them. The officers weren't convinced. Ryan looked satisfied, and Jasmine, Jasmine just wanted to go home. Jasmine. Her mother's voice cut through the moment like a blade. Monica Carter stepped out of her black sedan with the kind of presence that made people take notice. Dressed in a sleek pantsuit, her expression was unreadable, but the fire in her eyes was unmistakable. She strode across the pavement, her heels clicking against the concrete like gunfire. "What's going on here?" she demanded, her voice calm but firm. Ryan turned to her, clearly ready to explain. "Ma'am, I was just looking out for the neighborhood. She was standing here alone, looking around like she was—" "Like she was what?" Monica cut in, her gaze slicing through him. The officers shifted uncomfortably. The older one cleared his throat. "Ma'am, we got a call about suspicious activity. We were just checking things out." "Suspicious activity?" Monica repeated, stepping closer. "My daughter standing outside a store waiting for me to pick her up is now considered suspicious?" The younger officer stiffened. "Ma'am, we're just following up on a report." Monica tilted her head, studying them. Then, in a voice so smooth it was nearly lethal, she said, "Do you know who I am?" A flicker of hesitation crossed the older officer's face. Monica reached into her handbag and pulled out her credentials, flipping them open with a practiced motion. United States, Department of Justice, Federal Prosecutor. The officers paled. Ryan's face went from smug to slack-jawed in an instant. Monica exhaled, shaking her head. "Now, let me ask you again. Are you detaining my daughter without probable cause?" Silence. The air around them seemed to shrink. The power dynamic had shifted in an instant. Jasmine watched, her chest swelling with something between relief and pride. The officers exchanged quick glances before the older one cleared his throat. "No, ma'am. We were just making sure everything was in order." Monica's lips curled in something that wasn't quite a smile. "Well, now it is." She took Jasmine's ID from the officer's hand, slipping it back into her daughter's grip. Then she turned to Ryan, her gaze piercing. "You should be ashamed of yourself." Ryan swallowed hard, his confidence draining from him like air from a punctured tire. Monica didn't wait for a response. She placed a gentle hand on Jasmine's back and guided her toward the car. "Let's go, sweetheart." Jasmine cast one last look at the officers and Ryan. They looked smaller now. She slid into the passenger seat, exhaling as Monica started the car. And as they pulled away, she didn't just feel like she had escaped something. She felt like she had won. The tension in the car was thick, but Jasmine could tell her mother wasn't going to let this go. Monica Carter wasn't just any mother, she was a federal prosecutor, a woman who spent her career dismantling men like Ryan Calloway in the courtroom, exposing biases, tearing apart weak justifications, and ensuring that people who wielded power irresponsibly were held accountable. Like Iris. Moments like this made even going to town indispensable. Jasmine sat in the passenger seat, still gripping her school ID, her mind replaying the last 15 minutes. The way the officers had looked at her like she didn't belong. The way Ryan had stood there, so sure of himself, so convinced he was in the right. Her mother's voice cut through her thoughts. "You okay?" Jasmine nodded, but Monica wasn't buying it. "I'm fine," Jasmine insisted. "I mean, I knew something like this would happen eventually." Monica's grip on the steering wheel tightened. "It shouldn't have." They were at a red light now, and Monica glanced over at her daughter, her sharp brown eyes scanning Jasmine's face as if searching for hidden wounds. Jasmine sighed, turning her gaze toward the window. "Mom, let's just go home." But Monica wasn't done. "No, we're going back." Jasmine's head snapped toward her. "What?" Monica's jaw was set. "I'm not letting this slide." Jasmine groaned, already knowing where this was going. "Mom." "Jasmine, that man called the police on you for waiting. Those officers questioned you like you were a criminal, and they only backed off because of who I am." Monica's voice was razor-sharp now. "What happens when I'm not there? What happens to some other black kid who doesn't have a federal prosecutor for a mother?" Jasmine swallowed, her mother's words hitting a nerve. She wanted to just leave, to forget this night ever happened, but she knew Monica Carter wasn't built that way. The light turned green. Monica made a U-turn. Jasmine sighed but didn't argue. They were going back. By the time they returned to the parking lot, Ryan was still there, standing beside his car, talking to the officers. From the way he gestured, he looked like he was still trying to justify himself, still convinced he had done the right thing. Jasmine felt her stomach twist, but she forced herself to sit up straight. Her mother parked the car and stepped out. Ryan looked up, his smug expression returning. "Oh, so you came back," he said, a smirk tugging at his lips. Monica didn't even glance at him. She walked straight to the officers. "Which one of you is in charge?" The older officer, Officer Mitchell, according to his badge, shifted uncomfortably. "Ma'am, as I said earlier, we were just responding to a call." "That's not what I asked," Monica interrupted smoothly. "Which one of you is in charge?" The younger officer, whose name tag read Denton, hesitated before nodding toward Mitchell. Monica turned to him. "All right. Officer Mitchell, I need your badge number." Mitchell blinked. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," she said, her voice cool and unwavering. Ryan scoffed, folding his arms. "Oh, come on now, you're really going to make this a whole thing?" Monica turned to him, her eyes steady. "Sir, you made it a whole thing the moment you called the police on my daughter for no reason." Ryan's smirk faltered, but he didn't back down. "She was just standing here, looking suspicious. I was looking out for the neighborhood." Monica tilted her head slightly, the way a predator sizes up its prey. "Suspicious how, exactly?" Ryan hesitated. Monica took a step closer. "What about her was suspicious? Was it the fact that she was standing in public, that she was using her phone, that she wasn't running or breaking into cars? Tell me, sir, what exactly did she do?" Ryan cleared his throat, his eyes darting toward the officers for support. She had a hoodie on and—" "A hoodie?" Monica repeated, cutting him off. "So, is every teenager wearing a hoodie suspicious? Or just the black ones?" Ryan's face reddened. "That's not what I meant." Monica took another step closer. "It is what you meant. You saw a young black girl standing outside a store, and instead of minding your business, you assumed she was up to no good. You chose to escalate this. You chose to involve law enforcement in something that should have been none of your concern, and now you want to act like it was all just a misunderstanding?" Ryan swallowed hard. I didn't mean any harm." Monica let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "Didn't mean any harm? Tell that to the black families who've lost children because of concerned citizens like you. Tell that to the mothers who didn't get there in time." Ryan looked away, his Adam's apple bobbing. Jasmine could barely breathe. She had never seen her mother like this calm, controlled fury. Monica turned back to the officers. "And you two, what exactly were you planning to do? Arrest her? Search her? Throw her to the ground if she resisted answering your questions?" Mitchell's face was pale now. "Ma'am, we were just—" "No," Monica snapped. "You were profiling her, and the only reason you backed off is because you recognized me." Denton shifted uncomfortably. "Look, we don't want any trouble here." "Oh, you don't want trouble?" Monica repeated, voice dripping with sarcasm. "You didn't mind causing her trouble? You didn't mind humiliating my daughter, treating her like a suspect for standing outside?" Mitchell let out a breath. "Ma'am, what do you want from us?" Monica's expression didn't waver. "I want an official report filed about this incident. I want it documented that a minor was wrongfully detained because of a racially motivated complaint. And I want a copy of that report by Monday morning." The officers looked at each other. "We'd have to check with—" "I am the law," Monica said flatly. "Don't check with anyone. Do it." Silence stretched between them. Finally, Mitchell sighed. "Fine." Ryan scoffed. "This is ridiculous." Monica turned to him, her stare cutting him down to size. No, what's ridiculous is that people like you get to weaponize law enforcement against black kids because of your own prejudices. What's ridiculous is that my daughter has to be afraid of people like you every time she steps outside. That is ridiculous." Ryan opened his mouth but had nothing to say. Monica exhaled sharply and turned back to Jasmine. "Let's go." Jasmine hesitated for a moment, then followed her mother to the car. Before getting in, she turned back to Ryan. He was still standing there, looking smaller than before. "You were so sure you were right," she said quietly. "What changed?" Ryan swallowed, but no words came out. Jasmine nodded to herself and got into the car. As Monica drove away, the parking lot grew smaller in the rearview mirror, and with it, so did Ryan. The ride home was silent. Jasmine sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window, watching the streetlights blur past. She knew her mother was still fuming, gripping the steering wheel so tightly that her knuckles were pale. "I need to file a formal complaint," Monica finally muttered. "Not just with the police department. This has to go higher." Jasmine let out a breath. "Mom, can we just—" "No." Monica's voice was sharp. "You think this is over?" She glanced at Jasmine. "You think that man, Ryan, learned his lesson? That those officers will do anything differently next time?" Jasmine shifted uncomfortably. "I mean, maybe," Monica scoffed. "No, they won't. Not unless we make them." Jasmine sighed, rubbing her temples. She wasn't sure what she wanted. A part of her was just exhausted. She had always known this kind of thing could happen. She had seen stories online, heard about it from friends, even sat through conversations her mother had about racial bias in the justice system. But knowing something could happen and experiencing it were two very different things. She had never felt so powerless. Her mother must have sensed the shift in her mood because when Monica spoke again, her voice had softened. "I know you just want to forget about it," she said. "I know you're tired." Jasmine swallowed, her fingers playing with the hem of her hoodie. "It's just, I didn't do anything wrong." But it didn't matter. He still saw me as a threat. The cops still questioned me like I was guilty of something, and if you weren't my mom, if you weren't you, I don't even know how that would have ended. Monica's grip on the wheel tightened again. "That's why I can't let this go." Jasmine exhaled. They pulled into the driveway, and for a long moment neither of them moved. Then Monica turned off the engine and faced her daughter. "I need you to understand something," she said. "This isn't just about tonight. This is about every time something like this happens. To you, to other kids who look like you. We can't afford to just let it slide." Jasmine met her mother's gaze. She knew her mom was right, but that didn't make it any easier. The next morning, Jasmine woke up to the sound of her mother on the phone. She groggily sat up, rubbing the sleep from her eyes, and stepped into the hallway. "I don't care if it was a misunderstanding," Monica was saying. "The fact remains that my daughter was targeted, detained, and treated like a suspect for nothing. That officer needs to be disciplined, and I want an internal investigation opened." Jasmine sighed, walking toward the kitchen. She poured herself some cereal, but the appetite wasn't really there. She was halfway through forcing down a few bites when Monica walked in. "Good, you're up," she said, grabbing her laptop and setting it on the table. "We need to document everything while it's fresh." Jasmine groaned. "Mom, seriously?" Monica gave her a pointed look. "Do you want this to happen to someone else?" Jasmine sighed, setting down her spoon. No, she didn't. She knew her mother was right. Again. By noon, the entire story was on social media. It had started as just a simple post, Monica outlining what had happened, describing the interaction step by step. No exaggeration, no unnecessary drama, just facts. Then came the shares. First, friends and family. Then former colleagues of Monica's, other lawyers, activists. By the time Jasmine checked her phone, the post had been shared thousands of times. People were outraged. The comments were flooded with people calling for the officers to be fired, for Ryan to be held accountable. Jasmine scrolled, her heart hammering. It was surreal. Her face wasn't even in the post, but people were talking about her. Some were supportive, some were angry, and of course some were defending Wright. She probably looked suspicious. Why was she just standing there? Not everything is about race. Jasmine rolled her eyes, locking her phone. She shouldn't have looked. She should have known better. Monica, on the other hand, was already typing away at her laptop. "We need to push this further," she said. "We can't let the attention die down." Jasmine exhaled. "Mom, are you sure? I mean, what if people start coming after you, after us?" Monica looked at her daughter, her expression unreadable. Then she reached across the table, taking Jasmine's hand in hers. "I'm not afraid," she said, "and you don't have to be either." Jasmine swallowed. She wasn't sure that was true, but she wanted to believe it. 2 days later, the police department released a statement. It was generic, carefully worded. Something about regrettable misunderstandings and commitment to unbiased policing. They assured the public that additional training would be provided. Jasmine almost laughed. That was it? That was all they were going to do? But Monica wasn't done. She wrote a response. A long, blistering open letter that she sent to the local news, to legal organizations, to the mayor's office. And then something unexpected happened. Ryan Calloway apologized. Publicly. A reporter had tracked him down, asked him about the incident. At first he had doubled down, talking about how he was just trying to protect his community. But the backlash had been too strong. Eventually he cracked. In a shaky video interview, he admitted that he had acted on bias, that he had made an assumption about Jasmine based on her race, that he had never really thought about it before. Jasmine watched the clip with a mixture of emotions. He looked small, deflated. She should have felt satisfaction, but she didn't. She just felt tired. Monica, though, looked triumphant. "That," she said, nodding at the screen, "is why we fight." Jasmine stared at the pause video. She wasn't sure how to feel about it. But one thing was certain. She would never forget this night. And neither would Ryan. That evening, as the dust started to settle, Jasmine and Monica sat on the couch together, watching TV. For the first time in days, things felt almost normal again. Almost. "Still mad at me for making a big deal out of it?" Monica asked, a teasing smile on her lips. Jasmine smirked. "Nah, you were right." Monica gasped dramatically. "Say that again. Louder, into the mic." Jasmine rolled her eyes but laughed. It was the first time she had really laughed since that night. And for now that was enough.